Hey guys, what's going on? It has been a pretty eventful week actually. So we went and got, or I went with the kids and got our whole beef cow that we sent in for our personal freezer. We did sell all of the ground beef out of it because we didn't need any more. We already have a ton. So we sold all of that and we also gave some away to family and friends. But we mostly sent her in for like steaks, roasts, all those different cuts that that we use a lot of. We use the boys love steak. Paul loves steak. Kingston loves steak. So we eat a lot of that, and that can get kind of pricey. We do try to buy locally. There's plenty of places to buy locally where we live. There's plenty of beef farms, but it still gets pretty pricey. So there's two squirrels playing on the tree out there. I got distracted for a second. So it gets kind of pricey. So we sent this cow in. It was actually a cow that we bought through our livestock ordering business. For those of you who don't know, we buy, sell, haul livestock all over New England. We'll do anywhere from where we are in Maine to like 10 hours away. Usually that's like Pennsylvania. You can go 10 hours in the other direction and go to like Maryland, or that we were selling for somebody. And we ended up buying her ourselves and sending her in. She was 5 years old. And so the general consensus is don't send in a cow that's too old or had too many babies, or a bull that's too old and been in with cows, because in general the steaks will be a little bit tougher than your good market aged, like market ready steer or heifer. She wasn't bad, and now she had spent the last 2 to 3 months of her life like completely stress free in a pasture here by herself eating. We did put her on like a show steer like type diet. I had her on beet pulp. I had her on show cow grain. I had her on some corn at the end. And that's stuff that we're comfortable with doing, especially when we have a cow like that that's older and needs to, the meat quality needs to be fixed before she goes in. She just came off of a calf, so that's how we fed her out. She has fantastic marbling. She tastes great. The chuck steaks are a little bit on the tougher side, but not like as bad as you would expect. And everything else has been fantastic. But I wanted to talk to you guys about the different cuts that we did get in case you're sending in a cow or steer soon and you're kind of wondering, well, what can I ask for? What can I get? And you can also do your own research. Just kind of like Google, hey, what steak cuts should I ask my butcher for? And then you'll come up with a list, a way to use them. And you don't be afraid to ask. Your butcher knows more than what they put on the instruction sheet, right? So typically a good butcher will give you an instruction sheet to fill out. If your butcher isn't taking down instructions, don't use them, because they're not going to remember that with their head. They're just counting on you not caring that you get back whatever you get back. They should be giving you an instruction sheet on cutting, and don't be afraid to ask for things that aren't on that instruction sheet. They're going to list things that are most common, that most people absolutely always want. And so that makes it more simple for most people. But if you're looking for something different, just write down, hey, I'd also like this cut. So, so an eventful week. On our way, me and the kids' way to get the beef, we actually had to stop and call in an accident after avoiding being in the accident. We had a close call with a drunk driver at 10 a.m. We basically had to pull onto someone's lawn to get away from him, let him go around us, and then sure enough, as I was on the phone calling him in, because he was headed towards a really busy in-town area, and I knew somebody was going to get hurt if he got there. He was going I was going 60, 65 trying to get his license plate number, and he was making headway on me. So I knew somebody was going to get hurt. I knew they needed to cut him off before he got there. He did end up crashing himself. Thankfully, not taking anybody else out with him. We were on a very, very busy main route. And he was fine. He climbed up out of the ditch while I was there. The police department showed up super quickly, and then me and the kids left and went on our way to get the beef. I really hope that man, he obviously looked like he was probably in his 40s, but maybe 30s, but mostly 40s. I hope that he finds self-worth in his life, because nobody should die in a ditch because they have a drinking problem, and so he deserves better from himself about that, and hopefully he finds it. Hopefully he gets better. I know it's hard for them, especially if they don't have support at home, but hopefully he finds help. So the beef, we'll get started on that. I'm going to show you the different cuts that we got, tell you how we use them, just kind of give you an idea of what you can ask for if you have a cow going in soon, or if you bought half a cow or a whole cow off of a local farmer. Alright, first we have the flank steak, and the flank steak is typically pretty thin. You can see how thin that is. The flank steak, the skirt steak, the hanger steak, we all, typically I use them all the same way. The flank and the skirt steak are both really good sliced thin. So use them in a dish that you're going to slice them thin. Typically I make fajitas with them because on taco night I don't like plain ground beef tacos. So that's what I use these for personally. Beef steak tips. That's pretty simple. You can order these in just about any restaurant you go to that serves steak. Typically they're nice and tender. I did have a package of these out of her and 5-year-old cow, and these were super tender, super flavorful. So don't be afraid to send in those older cows either. So beef steak tips and flank steak, those are the first two cuts that we got. I know I told you that we use the skirt steak pretty similar to how we use the flank steak, but I just kind of want to show you the difference in like the marbling, and every cut of steak's a little different. I'll turn that around so maybe you can see. She was pretty well marbled, which is good. We like that. So that's the skirt steak. Paul is a little ridiculous. When I let him, I like my steak cut at like 1 inch thick or so. I let him choose this time, and we got 1.5 inch thick steaks, you guys. Basically small roasts. But that's what he wanted, and they are good. So this is a sirloin tip steak. This is one of the smaller ones. Paul's not a sirloin fan. Usually I end up eating like the New Yorks and the sirloin tips. He has teeth problems, so he really has to stick to the tender cuts, like ribeye and the steak tips. He can eat those. One that I want to talk to you guys about, because this one is one of those things that if you choose this, you kind of lose, other cuts. So the strip steak. So as you can see, this is 2 of them, and it's kind of small. The strip steak is the tender piece off of your porterhouse or your T-bone. So we don't, I don't mind eating around the bone on a porterhouse or T-bone. Paul's not a huge fan, so we usually just get the strip steaks because that's the tender part. Like I said, he has to have tender cuts. So that's kind of your give or take there. You can get them done like half and half. You can get half strip steaks and half porterhouses and T-bones. That's completely up to you. We just get all strip steaks, and that's fine with us. We always get chuck steaks. Now we know that they aren't the chuck and the Chuck Delmonico. We get both. So the Chuck Delmonico is a better cut tender-wise than the regular chuck. It comes from like the very tip of the chuck, I believe. So we always get chuck steak because we love the flavor because it always has good marbling. It is a little bit on the tougher side. But you can tenderize it. It usually works pretty well. Or again, slice it thin. If these chuck steaks out of her, because she was older, are just really kind of proving to be too tough, what we'll do is we'll probably just slice these up and either use them as like steak bomb sandwich steaks, or I'll make some beef jerky out of them. So it's okay to take those chances on those older beef critters, because you can do stuff with it if it turns out to not be a great steak cut. This is another really small steak cut. So this cow in particular only weighed in at 552 hanging weight, and she was really tall. So she wasn't like, she was decently beefy. Like you can see the size of the steaks are decent. But some of the steaks, like the smaller ones, like the strip steak, and this is a blade steak, are a little smaller. That's okay. The blade steak, it's only going to be for me anyway, so I'll probably just eat them for lunch and stuff like that. So the blade steak is extremely tender, but the blade steak has one thing about it that's kind of annoying. Now, hopefully I can show you guys. I don't know if it's going to show up very well on my camera. So you see that dark strip right there? So that goes down the middle of every single blade steak, and it is not tender. In fact, you really don't want to eat it at all. So I know if you slice them like super thin after you cook them, it's fine, it's edible, but it annoys Paul so bad that it's there. So look, this is the other one. See that dark strip? Yeah. So as tender and wonderful as these are, I like them. I'll deal with it. I'll eat it. I'll eat around it. They do have that piece going through them that makes them kind of a pain in the butt. So if you're not patient enough to eat around that, you might not want these. But if you are, these are really great because they are really tender and tasty. Obviously, we got the New York sirloins. Again, this isn't Paul's favorite, so I'll end up eating these. He'll take out a ribeye and I'll end up eating these, which is fine. So those are our New York sirloins. There's 2 of them in there. So a cut that I really like to cook with and I really like to play with. Again, this cow wasn't incredibly meaty. She wasn't like you know, she wasn't a market steer or a young heifer. She was really tall. She was really big boned. She was like a taller Angus, so she wasn't unreasonably meaty. So the short ribs, so these ones are decent. You know, they're not terrible. We've had way bigger. But the short ribs are super fun to cook down real slow. Usually I sear them off first in a really hot pan, and then I cook them down really slow, either in the crock pot, the Instant Pot, or the oven. And then we pull them apart, and they make phenomenal pulled beef sandwiches. So that's typically how we use the beef short ribs. So I think that might be all I have down here in this freezer. So this is kind of like our extra storage freezer. It's also our sale freezer. We have another freezer or 2. Well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 freezers all together. 1 in the house, in the kitchen, 2 downstairs in the basement, and then 1 out here. This is where we keep a lot of the sale meat too. So that's all I have for cuts down here. But the other things we did get a prime rib roast because Paul's been dying to try cooking one of those. If you get one of those or any, you know, some of those, you are losing your ribeyes. We only got 1 because he really loves ribeyes, so the rest we got in ribeyes. We got shaved steak because we love steak bombs. So we got some shaved steak, a few good marbled roasts because we do have a smoker and Paul loves to smoke meat on weekends. And we got the ground beef. We got soup bones. I always get the soup bones. I have a video further back that explains what I do with them, I think. But real quick, so with the soup bones, I roast them off sometimes. If I have time, I roast them off in the oven, but sometimes I just throw them in the crock pot. So anyways, they go in the crock pot and they cook down for literally like 24 hours. And then the next day, I take the beef, and I will typically, the beef off of a soup bone will just shred right off if you put them in the crock pot. And typically soup bones are really meaty. So you're getting a good amount of beef there. Don't opt out for those. So I take the beef off. Usually I'll make dinner with it that night, and I can the rest of the beef in its own broth, okay? So we put that on the shelf, and then I put the bones back in the crock pot. I add whatever I have on hand, onions, tomatoes, carrots, whatever I like to put in my beef stock. Fill it back up with water with those bones and those veggies in it, and let it cook down another 24 hours. And then the next day, I can the beef broth. Those soup bones get me a meal, canned beef, and homemade bone broth. So those soup bones are really important, and they're really versatile. So they're a good cut. They're a very, very overlooked cut and underappreciated. So if you know what to do with them, they're super, super useful, especially if you're putting up a lot of your own food. So the soup bones are super important. We got roast, we got ribeyes. So that's kind of it. I'm sorry if you guys can hear me breathe. I have a unknown, unfigured out kind of problem with inflammation, like underneath my ribs and in between my lungs, and sometimes I just have a really hard time breathing like all day for no apparent reason. It's not asthma or anything like that. So if I'm breathing really hard in videos, that's why. My chest is just giving me a hard time. But those are the beef cuts that we got out of this cow. And if I think of anything else, I'll mention it on the next video. But just make sure your butcher is asking you for instructions and writing it down, because if they're not writing it down, they don't care. Ask for reviews for a butcher. If you're sitting in your own cow, ask for reviews. Go on your local Facebook page, say who uses what butcher, how do you like them. And if you're ordering from a local farm, just, don't be afraid to ask for, those cuts. Like I asked for hanger steak. That's not on their, shaved steak or hanger steak are not on their list. Neither is prime rib roast. But we knew we wanted those, so we wrote them down on the side of the instruction sheet. I hope you guys have a great rest of your work week. I'm going to head inside. First, I'm going to put all the steak back in the freezer, and then I'm going to head inside. It looks like the sun might come out a little bit today. We've had a lot of rain here. It's been really hard to get haying done because of a lot of rain. We're only getting like one sunny day out of like 3 days. The other 2, it rains. Great for the garden, but it is a little difficult. It's making everything really wet. It's making the dogs disgusting, but it is what it is. Have a great rest of your work week, you guys. Good luck and enjoy that homegrown beef.